Hey everyone, welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Great to be back.
Last time we just started touching on the really sensitive and often banned legacy of 8964. And honestly, wow, the feedback was incredible.
Yeah, really was.
So many of you reached out wanting to spend more time on this, wanting to go deeper.
Absolutely. It's clearly a topic that resonates and one where getting clear information can be really challenging depending on where you are in the world. So we listened.
Today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking another plunge based on the information you've shared with us. We're going to look at some different angles presented there.
And we'll use a pretty striking metaphor from one piece to maybe help understand why this history is handled the way it is by some.
And then we'll pivot to a completely different perspective, included in what you sent, how China's distinct view of democracy is presented today, something called whole process people's democracy.
Right. Our mission, as always, here on The Deep Dive, is to walk you through these different viewpoints laid out in the information you've curated for us.
We're not here to tell you what to think about any of it, but just to help you see what's actually in these descriptions and maybe make sense of it all.
Okay, let's dive in then. The 1989 Tiananmen Square event, sometimes referred to as the June 4th incident, is, well, undoubtedly a really complex and deeply sensitive historical moment.
Yeah.
One piece you provided gives a brief description of the core events. Protests in Beijing and other areas led mainly by students, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens.
What were they asking for?
They were calling for things like more democracy, measures against corruption, and greater freedoms. Pretty significant demands.
And how did the situation unfold from there based on this description?
Well, according to this account, the government eventually deployed military force to put down these protests, which tragically led to casualties.
Casualties.
Yes. The exact numbers are difficult to verify and are, debated, but suppression by the military did happen.
Okay.
This same account notes that the official description within China for this event is typically a counter-revolutionary riot. And a really key point it highlights is that information about 8964 is very tightly controlled inside China.
How so?
It's largely absent from the internet, school textbooks, and state media. Just not really discussed openly.
So this event happened, people died, and now, according to the information you sent, it's a really sensitive topic with information about it heavily restricted. The big question that jumps out is why? Why such strict control?
Exactly.
One of the pieces you shared offers what I found to be a really powerful metaphor to help grasp the potential reasons behind this. And it framed it in a way that just sticks with you.
It is a very vivid comparison, almost like a story, isn't it?
Exactly. So imagine, if you were, a mom. And this mom constantly tells everyone outside the family how absolutely wonderful she is. Talks about how much she loves her kids, how her family is the happiest, most harmonious unit you could ever imagine.
Putting forward that perfect, ideal image to the world.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Now, her kids, initially they respect her. But as the big kids get older, they start asking questions. They ask about the rules of the house, maybe how the family money is being managed. They want a bigger say in things, perhaps even suggesting she's a bit too strict sometimes. Pretty natural things kids might ask as they grow up.
You'd think so. Seems reasonable.
Right. But instead of sitting down and having a conversation, this mom does something different. Late one night, without much warning, she brings in some relatives to help, and she severely disciplines the big kids.
Okay.
The account describing this mentions that some of these kids, after that night, are just gone. They never come home again.
Wow. A really heavy consequence described there.
It is. And then after that terrible night, she tells the other kids, the younger ones, that those big kids were actually bad.
Shifts the blame.
Completely. She says they didn't love the family and they were being manipulated by bad people from the outside. And then she lays down a strict rule. You are never, ever allowed to talk about that night or about the big kids who aren't here anymore.
Yeah.
It's completely taboo.
The event itself becomes unspeakable, forbidden history.
Yes. And to ensure it stays that way, she goes even further. She rewrites the family history books. She burns old photos that might show the big kids or hint at the past.
Erasing the evidence.
And she even puts up a firewall on the family internet to make absolutely sure no one can search for or find any information about that time. And when outsiders ask about the big kids or what happened that night, she just smiles and says, "Nothing happened. My family is wonderful. I'm busy providing for everyone, and you shouldn't believe any rumors you hear."
Okay, connecting that powerful metaphor back to the 8964 event, this perspective draws the parallels quite explicitly. This mom is likened to the entity of the Chinese Communist Party, which itself sometimes uses terms like motherland or mother country.
That connection reinforces the analogy, doesn't it?
Precisely. The big kids represent the students and citizens who protested in 1989, asking for democratic reforms and an end to corruption.
Right, the ones asking questions.
Exactly. The discipline and the blocking mirror the military suppression of the protests, followed by the extensive information blockade and media ban that was put in place.
So banning talk of that night is like making 89 out of 64 a forbidden topic.
Exactly. 8964 becomes a taboo subject, essentially erased from history textbooks and public discussion within China. Burning photos is the equivalent of deleting online content related to the event and using keyword filtering the Great Firewall to make searching for it impossible.
And the firewall on the family internet.
That's the Great Firewall comparison. And when outsiders ask, that reflects the international community raising human rights concerns or questioning the historical narrative, which is often met with denial or deflection.
Wow. That metaphor really helps illustrate not just what happened in terms of information control, but also why it might feel necessary from a certain perspective. This piece you shared also dives into the core reasons for this kind of censorship, linking it back to the mom's actions.
It does. The primary reason presented in this view is that the severe violence used during the suppression fundamentally clashes with the image the CCP promotes, an image of serving the people, ensuring stability, building a harmonious society, and being a people's regime.
Right, that perfect mom image.
Exactly. This viewpoint argues that allowing open discussion about 964 would expose the government's actions in a way that could seriously undermine its legitimacy and damage its moral standing in the eyes of its own people and the world. It's about protecting that carefully constructed narrative.
It's like the mom can't be seen as anything less than perfect in her role, even if the actions contradict it.
Precisely. Beyond that central point, this perspective touches on other potential reasons for the censorship. Maintaining political stability is a big one. The event involved broad sections of society, and the memory could be seen as a potential risk for future social unrest or challenges to authority.
So avoiding anything that might stir things up again.
That seems to be a major factor suggested here. There's also the desire to protect historical legitimacy, the continuous narrative of the party's leadership. Re-examining 8964 could involve scrutinizing decisions made at the highest levels during a period of reform and internal debate.
So you control the story of the past to ensure the stability of the present and future.
That's a key part of the argument presented here. Avoiding international pressure is another factor mentioned. Limiting domestic knowledge and discussion helps minimize international attention and criticism, particularly in today's geopolitical climate.
Makes sense from that angle.
There's also the legacy of internal factional struggles within the party leadership from that time. Opening up 964 history could potentially re-expose those divisions, which isn't conducive to current political unity.
It sounds like this history touches on a lot of very sensitive nerves for the system described.
It appears so, based on this perspective. And controlling the historical narrative is absolutely crucial for maintaining a unified ideology and preventing alternative viewpoints from challenging the official one.
What else did it mention?
The description also brings in some supplementary ideas. A social psychology angle suggesting a fear that young people, if they learned the full history, might become angry or curious in ways the state can't control.
The younger kids in the metaphor.
Exactly. Then there's the simple technical reality of the Great Firewall making such comprehensive censorship possible, and a deliberate long-term goal of allowing collective memory to fade, especially for younger generations who weren't alive during the event.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack from that single event. And the perspective on why it's handled this way. Using that metaphor really makes it stark.
It does.
If a mom does all of this, the violence, the lies, the suppression, the memory erasure, just to maintain her public good mom image and cover up past mistakes, is that fundamentally driven by love for the family? Or is it about control and self-preservation? That's the powerful question this perspective poses for you, the listener.
And this perspective even goes further, offering a kind of psychological interpretation of the mom figure's actions.
Oh, really? Like what?
It suggests maybe the mom is in denial or suppression over the trauma she inflicted, that her controlling personality is driven by deep insecurity, and she uses defense mechanisms, like rationalization telling herself the kids were bad or used by outside forces rather than facing her own actions.
This view practically asks, Does this mom need therapy?
It really does use that kind of framing, but then it immediately follows by noting that she's highly unlikely to ever seek it.
What?
Because she insists she's perfectly fine, and it's actually the kids or outsiders who have the problem. And here's where this analysis gets pretty concerning. If the mom hasn't admitted any wrongdoing, if she found her violent methods effective in getting compliance the first time, and now she has even tighter control over the younger generation, this perspective argues she's likely to act that way again if challenged.
This view presents that cycle not as protecting the family, but as passing down an inheritance of fear. It's a heavy thought.
It truly is. Now, shifting gears from this critical look at historical handling, the information you sent us also includes a perspective that describes how China's governance system is presented today.
Right, and this introduces something called whole process people's democracy. Kind of a mouthful.
Correct. WPPD, for short, maybe. Based on descriptions found in the materials you shared, this is presented as a concept developed by the Chinese Communist Party for the public's participation in governance, specifically under their system of socialism with Chinese characteristics. It's explicitly positioned as distinct from Western models, which are often seen in this framing as focusing primarily or even solely on elections. This WPPD model is described as being specifically crafted for China's unique circumstances and long history.
So the idea is that democracy isn't just about voting day. It's more continuous.
That's precisely how it's framed in these accounts. The term whole process democracy first entered public discussion when Xi Jinping used it in late 2019. At that point, it was largely describing governance practices that were already in place, highlighting existing elements of public involvement in things like, say, the legislative process or local government work.
And it became official later.
It was formally written into Chinese law in March of 2021.
And the people's part. When did that get added?
That was added a few months later, in July 2021, again by Xi Jinping. This addition connected the concept more closely to ideas like common prosperity and brought in the historical practice of the mass line.
The mass line.
Which broadly means the party consulting with ordinary people and implementing policies based on their needs and input. This perspective presents WPPD as an innovation that has emerged organically from China's history, political theory, and practical governance experience.
Okay, so whole process people's democracy. What does that actually look like in action, according to these descriptions? How does it work?
According to these materials, it means ensuring public participation isn't limited to one stage, but happens throughout the entire process of governance.
The whole process, like the name said.
Exactly. This includes all aspects, everything from initial consultations and elections, through decision-making and management, all the way to oversight. The goal is to involve all sectors of society, fostering broad, continuous participation so that government decisions genuinely reflect the collective will and evolving needs of the people.
And what's the stated priority?
Rights, voices, and general well-being are said to be prioritized, with the people viewed as the true masters of the country, governing through consensus and consultation.
So it's presented as participation at every level, not just at the ballot box. Are there concrete examples provided of how this works?
Yes. A primary example highlighted in these descriptions is the 2 sessions.
Yes, you hear about those meetings.
These are the major annual meetings held in Beijing involving China's top legislative body, the National People's Congress, or NPC, and the top political advisory body, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, known as the CPPCC.
That sounds like a huge assembly.
It is massive. We're talking thousands of representatives, nearly 3,000 NPC deputies, and over 2,100 CPPCC members converging to discuss major national policies and governance issues.
And who are these representatives?
The materials emphasize the wide diversity. They come from virtually all walks of life, including frontline workers, farmers, people from ethnic minorities, even the smallest groups are represented, scientists, educators, entrepreneurs, and government officials.
So the idea is that people from all different parts of society are represented and participating in discussions about everything from healthcare to education to the economy.
That's the representation presented in these sources. NPC deputies deliberate on proposed laws and government reports, elect officials, and are described as having the power to criticize or make suggestions. CPPCC members focus on offering policy proposals.
So it's a forum for input.
These meetings are presented as a key mechanism for ensuring broad civic engagement and participation that spans the entire governance cycle, embodying the whole process idea.
Interesting. And why, according to this perspective from the information provided, is WPPD considered significant or effective?
This view argues that because it ensures broad and continuous participation, it's a highly effective model of governance that is genuinely rooted in the people's will. It's presented as having proven successful in tackling national challenges and continually improving governance.
Are there specific examples given?
The descriptions offer examples like enhancements to labor rights for delivery workers or support for small and medium-sized businesses, stating that these policies originated from legislative proposals and public consultations held under this system.
So it's framed as a results-oriented system that actually solves problems and improves lives, not just about theory.
Yes, precisely.
But this concept has been heavily promoted by the Chinese government in recent years, touted as a democratic model with Chinese characteristics. However, there are many critical voices arguing that it is merely a grand performative ritual without votes. It emphasizes full participation from decision-making to implementation, which sounds idealistic, as if the people can express their opinions through various channels, such as the National People's Congress, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or grassroots consultations. However, critics argue that the core issue with this system is the lack of genuine electoral competition. Without votes, power ultimately remains concentrated in the hands of the ruling party, and the sense of participation for ordinary people may be superficial at best. This serves a dual purpose, both domestically and internationally. Domestically, the government aims to enhance the legitimacy of its system through this narrative, making the public feel involved and maintaining social stability. Internationally, especially in response to Western criticisms of its democratic credentials, China seeks to showcase a different kind of democracy to counter claims that it lacks democracy. However, without votes or competition, this form struggles to gain credibility on the global stage.
Yeah, which brings us back to something mentioned, I think last time, the idea that 1989 might have been China's closest moment to true democracy.
Right.
If you think about the demands of those protesters, as described in the 89-64 focused information, they were asking for things like multi-candidate elections and greater individual freedoms.
Okay, so that kind of electoral individual rights focus.
Yes. Now, contrast that with the official description of whole process people's democracy we discussed today from other materials, which focuses on guided participation throughout all processes and judging the system's success by delivered results and socioeconomic improvements, rather than focusing on electoral choice as the primary measure.
How are these two different ideas of what democracy means, as presented in the information, fundamentally different? It seems one emphasizes specific procedural rights and electoral voice sought by citizens back then.
While the official description today emphasizes holistic participation and tangible outcomes as the measure of democratic effectiveness. Very different priorities and definitions at play.
It really highlights how different frameworks define the same word, democracy, in such contrasting ways, based on the information you shared.
We've woven together quite a few threads today. The challenging history of 89-64, the perspective on why it's suppressed using that powerful mother metaphor, the official presentation of whole process people's democracy as a distinct and effective governance model, and the critical analysis from different viewpoints on both the handling of history and the current concept.
It's definitely a deep dive into some complex and sensitive topics. Lots to think about.
It has been. And to wrap things up, let's leave you with a thought based on one of the perspectives we explored today, specifically from the viewpoint that used the mother metaphor.
Okay, what's the final thought?
It suggests that maybe you can't fundamentally change that authoritarian figure, the mom, who demands obedience, terrified of being challenged because she fears losing control and facing her past mistakes.
Right, that feeling of powerlessness, maybe.
But that perspective also offers this incredibly powerful, hopeful idea. While you might not be able to wake someone who is actively pretending to be asleep, you can light a lamp so that others who are already awake don't feel so alone in the dark.
Wow. Something to really think about.
Yeah.
That was our deep dive for today, folks.
We truly hope exploring these different perspectives from the information you shared gave you some new insights and maybe sparked a few aha moments.
Remember to subscribe to Sip&Talk so you don't miss our next deep dive. We always appreciate you tuning in.
And speaking of friends, our buddy Micky has a YouTube channel you should totally check out. Lots of fun stuff like memes, music, travel vlog.
Oh yeah, Micky's great. And he just put up a new wine tasting video. Go check it out. It's really interesting and always a good time. Seriously, give it a look.
Definitely worth checking out.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And we'll catch you next time, right here on The Deep Dive.